the second in a 3-part series. If you missed last week, we did a good solid 2 hours on the basics of financial aid. Sort of financial aid 101 is what we called it. And so we went through the ins and outs of how to apply for financial aid for higher education, whether you're planning on attending a community college, a 4-year school, a UC, a Cal State, a private liberal arts school, out of state, you name it. We went through the entire process from the FAFSA to the CSS profile to talking about sort of the ins and outs of how financial aid works, where to find monies, where to access financial aid, both on the federal level, the state level, the private level from schools and institutions themselves. So there would be no way for me to go back and review those 2 hours. But
however, they will be uploaded to the Family Promise YouTube channel either tomorrow afternoon on Thursday, just depends on how long the upload actually takes, but it's done and ready to go. So either Wednesday or Thursday this week, it'll be available on the FPB YouTube channel.
Awesome. And that's exactly where I was going. To just plug that Christina will ultimately upload that session onto YouTube, onto Family Promise of the Verdugo's YouTube channel. And certainly if you have difficulty finding that on YouTube, you can always connect with Christina and she'll direct you and get you the link and set you up for that as well. So yeah, we covered a lot last time. And in session 2 this evening, we're going to focus on now actually funding and paying for college, right? And sort of strategies, tips, and hints for paying for this. It's such a large price tag for 4 years of undergraduate education. There are some people obviously who are even trying to do graduate studies, moving on to professional school like medical school, dental school, and so on. So all the sort of same principles apply. And what we want to do this evening is strategize on how we can best afford this. But before we get into it, let's do a bit of review. And let's take a short quiz. Because we're talking about school, we might as well take a quiz. So this is by way of review of our last session. What is the true definition of financial aid? This is something that I really tried to drive home last time, that often when we sort of throw that term around of financial aid, we normally think of financial aid as, oh, free money. But we know that that's not the case. What is the actual true definition of financial aid?
It's pick me.
Christina.
It's basically funding that's available exclusively for students, for secondary education, for higher, doesn't have to necessarily be college, but for higher education purposes, right?
Yeah, financial aid is financial resources that is available for community college, 4-year, trade school, vocational schools, right? Any sort of funding that's going to help us pay and cover tuition, fees, costs, potentially room and board if we're living on campus, right? This aid is going towards the total cost of attendance. But I also wanted to remind you that, remember, financial aid just doesn't mean free money, because they define it as also including money that's borrowed in the form of student loans, parent loans, right? So that's not free money. That's money you got to pay back. And that is part of the definition of financial aid. Then there is free money, grants and scholarships. And then there's money that's worked for, right, through a work study program. So 3 different kinds of monies make up that definition of financial aid: borrowed, free, and worked for, right? So I really wanted it to be clear last time that whenever colleges are talking about financial aid, that doesn't just mean free money. Okay, so if they're saying we offer students 100% financial aid, that doesn't necessarily mean all free money. It could be borrowed, it could be worked for, a portion could be free. Question number 2, what financial aid forms are needed to apply for college financial aid? Okay, this is a gimme question. What's the big one?
Social Security number.
No, the actual form.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What's the financial aid form that we need?
Oh,
yeah.
You're meaning for that to apply,
No.
what forms you needed to apply.
Yeah, what is the main form?
The FAFSA.
Yep, we need the FAFSA, right? The free application for federal student aid. That form unleashes 99.9% of all financial aid, whether the financial aid is coming from the federal government, the Department of Education, from the state. For example, we talked about the Cal Grant. If it's coming from the school itself, a student and their family have to do the FAFSA. You just have to do it in order to qualify for financial aid. Even if a household's income and assets are too high to qualify for need-based financial aid, many schools still want a student and family to complete the FAFSA before they give out their own merit aid, before they give out their own grants and scholarships, right? So oftentimes I hear parents say, oh, well, we're not going to qualify for anything. So what's the point in doing that? Well, the point is that if the school is wanting to give your student an academic scholarship and they look over to the financial aid office and your file is incomplete, they may not award those monies, right? So it's just good practice, whether you qualify or not, to do the FAFSA, right? What other form might you potentially have to fill out? So we talked about the FAFSA. A secondary form that you may have to fill out for financial aid is if you're applying to private colleges, some private colleges, not all, but some require the CSS profile. Remember, that's a form that we access through College Board, because private colleges, before they give out merit aid and academic scholarships, want to ask more questions about income and assets than the FAFSA does. So they make us fill out this second form. Right, so those are the two main forms. Depending on the school, you may also have additional school forms that you have to complete. But that's on a case-by-case basis, depending on the school. One of the acronyms that we threw around a lot last time was EFC. What is an
family
EFC?
Contribution.
Yes, expected family contribution. This is the number or the figure, the dollar amount that the FAFSA generates after you submit it, telling colleges what the form believes you can expect to pay out of pocket towards the cost of attendance. So we said, whether you can or not, the form doesn't care about that. Whether you have that money saved up or not, the form doesn't care about that. But it's trying to give the college a calculation of what they believe you can pay out of pocket through your expected family contribution towards the cost of attendance. We'll talk more about that today as we start strategizing about how to pay. Does anybody remember the difference between a subsidized and unsubsidized student loan? We talked about some very distinct differences. So there's a couple, but let's just look for one. What's one difference between subsidized and unsubsidized student loans? If you remember, the big difference between these two loans is one has interest accumulating while the student is in school, if you take this loan, The other one, interest is paused while you're in school. So the unsubsidized portion is the one student loan that has interest accruing while you're in school. So if you take unsubsidized monies, you borrow that in your freshman year, interest is building in your freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year, and even longer if it takes you longer to graduate and go into repayment. So we said a majority of students aren't finishing in 4, they're finishing in 5, finishing in 6 years, right? Because of financial burdens, because of other complications, right? So that interest on the unsubsidized portion is building and accruing each and every year. The subsidized portion, interest is paused. So that borrowed amount is not getting bigger while you're in school. Interest will start accruing once you're done with school and you go into repayment. That was the big difference between subsidized and unsubsidized. Okay, here's the last quiz question for the day. It's the easy one, true or false? You only have to file for financial aid one time.
False.
False, yeah, exactly. You have to apply for financial aid each and every year of your undergrad experience, right? So as a senior in high school, you're applying for your freshman year of college. And you're going to do that every subsequent year thereafter until you graduate and you no longer need financial aid. So it's not one and done, right? So it's going to be a yearly thing that you have to do, which is good. That's to our benefit, because if our income were to decrease in other years, right, we need to be able to show that loss of income and the need for more financial aid assistance, right? So you have to file every single year. Okay, I'll give a bonus point. Let's do a bonus point for this question. Let's see. Does anybody remember the amount that a freshman can receive in subsidized Stafford loans? First year, the maximum that a freshman student can borrow in subsidized student loan amount.
No. Don't tell me. These are on my notes. You'd think I'd be able to find it a lot faster.
It was a long session. I talked like nobody's business.
I don't want to say anything, but.
The subsidized portion that a freshman can take without interest accruing is $3,500. $3,500. So if you knew that, then you got the bonus point today.
I'm failing.
So here's what we're going to cover today. In session 2, in our strategizing and paying for college, we're going to talk about affordability. It has to be one of the considerations as we think about college. College is expensive, it's not cheap, and it needs to play into our planning, right? We're going to talk about how to use the net price calculator, right? How we can sort of guesstimate before we start applying, before we get into this process, what is a school going to cost? And how much aid can I get based on my income and assets? We're going to talk about different ways to fund paying the bill for college while our students are taking classes. How to look for outside scholarships, how to go about finding those, how to apply, what's the process like? We're going to talk about that. And then once students are accepted and we get a financial aid package from a school, how do we evaluate that and review it and understand what we're on the hook for in terms of costs, right? In terms of what we're going to have to pay out of pocket, and in terms of what kind of help are we actually getting? And is that help free? Is it borrowed? Is it worked for, right? And then what can I do if my student has settled on a school and we're having financial difficulties, and what we're getting in our financial aid package is not enough, right? It's going to potentially jeopardize our students' education because we can't afford it. How can we go back to the school and ask for more assistance? I'm going to walk you through that process as well. So let's talk about affordability data. Okay, so just like a student who is looking at SAT scores and what kind of GPA do I need, and what's the acceptance rate, and what are my application deadlines, all this data that students are gathering, as parents, right, and even as students should also be gathering affordability data, right? So it's more than just what does this school cost, right? So when I talk about affordability data, I'm talking about a couple of different things that are going to be key numbers that we should know about before we potentially give our students a $250,000 decision, right? Because like we looked at last time, some of these college costs can be as high as $70,000, $80,000 a year, depending on the type of school, right? And so by having our students just applying, trying to gain acceptance, we're giving them the power to say, look, these are the schools I want to apply to and go to, but mom and dad, they cost $70,000 times 4, right? So that's well over a $250,000 decision. So it's very important that in a part of this process, parents not only understand, but certainly students understand sort of the numbers behind these decisions that they're making through this application and admissions process. One place that you can go to find these numbers is collegeboard.org. So College Board is the organization or the institution that administers the SAT. They administer the entire AP program, advanced placement, and all the AP exams. They're the ones that administer the CSS profile financial aid form, right? So they're sort of one of the grounding organizations in the college world. They have a nice search feature where if you go to the website, you could look up any school in the nation. And if we were to look at, I don't know, UC Riverside, that's the shirt I'm wearing today, we would find financial aid information on UC Riverside. And really what it is it's UC Riverside's history of help. That's what I like to call it, history of help, in that they try to give us specific financial aid numbers so we can start planning in terms of how helpful the school will be, right, in helping us meet the full cost of attendance. And one of the numbers that you can find on collegeboard.org for every school is what is known as the percentage of need met. What that means is how helpful is a school in coming up with a student's remaining need. Okay, so like we did in the first session, let's just do some basic math to show you again. Let's say we have a student who's applying to a school where the cost of attendance, the COA, as you see there on the screen, is $35,000. Okay, just nice, even, easy math. We do our FAFSA. FAFSA says our EFC, our expected family contribution, is $10,000. So again, whether I can afford that or not, whether I've saved that up or not, that's what FAFSA is telling this college that I can afford to pay out of pocket for my student. That's my expected family contribution, right? Now the college could make me pay more, they could make me pay less. It's just a guiding number based on my FAFSA. But if we just do some basic subtraction, we see that I still have, for my student to get there and meet the full cost of attendance, there's a $25,000 remaining need. So if I'm looking at a school that says they meet 100% of my need, they're saying that historically, they try to come up with that full remaining need. They're going to try to find my $25,000. So you say, great, this is fantastic. They made 100% of my need. Amazing. I'm going to pay $10,000 potentially for a $35,000 school. And then we get the financial aid package back and we're shocked that we're going to be paying a lot more than $10,000. Why? Because remember, our definition of financial aid is borrowed money, free money, and worked for money. So if a school meets 100% of the need, they could come up with the $25,000 through all three forms of financial aid. They could make me borrow some, they could make me work for some as a student, or they could give me some free money. But we have to be wary here of some of these numbers, because even if a school says they meet 100% of need, they could still give me a financial aid package that says, oh, you could take $25,000 out in a student loan or a parent loan. And that is technically meeting our need, even though we have to borrow it. So in essence, I'm paying $10,000 out of pocket, borrowing $25,000, I'm paying the full cost. But a school can technically say we meet 100% of need. So it's an important number to be looking at, but I wanted to be very clear about how schools define that number and what that could potentially mean, because we get a lot of students and parents that come back sort of like disheartened because, wow, I didn't get the kind of help that I was expecting, the kind of help that I thought a school would give me, right? So I've seen colleges come back with that full $25,000 in free money. I've seen schools come back with it split three ways. I've seen schools just not give any free money and say, you could borrow it all, and we met 100% of your need. So that's how percentage of need met works. But I'm going to show you how this can be helpful in just a second in my next example. The other thing that we can do at every college is utilize a tool called the net price calculator. Every college website, through their financial aid tab, so the link on a college's website to their financial aid office, there will be somewhere on that page a link to a net price calculator. And so what you can do is you can use that net price calculator and answer several questions about your income and your assets. And the college, based on their history of financial aid, will generate an idea, okay? It's a guesstimate, an estimate of what, based on your household income and assets, you would probably end up paying if your student got accepted to that college. This is a very helpful tool early on when you're planning and you're strategizing about, can we even afford this school, right? So if you're looking at University of Oregon, right? And before you just jump in and start applying, parents use the net price calculator to calculate, right? And to get an idea based on your income and assets, how much Oregon would be for your household, okay? So some of these calculators are better than others. Some of them ask 2 or 3 questions about your 2019 income and any investments, and that's it. So it's really sort of an inaccurate picture. Some are better. They ask more questions like, what is your student's GPA? Because they're wanting to see, would they qualify for any academic scholarships? And they'll put that as part of their estimated calculation. So that's nice, because then you can see not only would I get need-based aid based on our finances, but then at this school would my student also qualify for any of their academic scholarships. So just be mindful of that. Some calculators are better than others. Right? At some point, I think we're going to get to a place where the net price calculator is sort of standardized and it's the same for all colleges across the nation. There is a federal calculator, but schools can choose to use it or not. So some of them still vary. Any questions right now? I'll pause for a second about affordability. Okay, let's look at a case study. Here's what I mean by percentage of need met being such an important figure. So we have two schools. Let's just call it school A and school B, right? Total cost of attendance at school A is $30,000. Total cost of attendance at school B is $20,000. We're just using even numbers. It just makes the mental math easier, right? So when we do the FAFSA, if our EFC is 10,000, I'm submitting that FAFSA data to all the schools on my students list. So effectively, my EFC is the same no matter where my student is applying. So at school A, my expected family contribution is 10,000. At school B, it's 10,000, right? But because one school A is more expensive than B, I have a higher need, right? But let's see where percentage of need met could make a less expensive school even more expensive in the end. Look what happens. School A meets 100% of need. In this case, based on their historical information that I could find on collegeboard.org, we see that of the 100%, a majority, 80%, is usually in the form of gift aid or free money. 20% is in self-help. Self-help meaning I'm helping myself by borrowing, or I'm helping myself by working for it, right? So free versus borrowed or worked for. School B only meets historically 60% of need, right? So if my need at school B is 10,000 and they're only going to meet 60% of it, right? I'm still short $4,000, right? So if I'm already going to pay in out of pocket 10,000 and they only meet 60% of my remaining need, I've got to come up with 4,000. I'm 4,000 short. What is the school going to do? School's going to say, well, mom and dad, that's what you got to pay, or student, that's what you got to pay. So I end up not paying 10 for school B, I end up paying 14, right? I have my 10 plus the shortfall of 4 because this school is just not as helpful, right? Whereas at school A, even though it was more expensive, they're meeting 100% of my need, right? And I'm only out of pocket paying 10. School B, I'm paying 14. So I'm actually paying more to go to potentially the cheaper school. So why do I bring all this up in terms of percentage of need met and so on? Never judge a school initially by the cost, because you can have more expensive schools bring the cost of attendance down, and it could be potentially cheaper than a less expensive school, right? So I've seen in personal instances of helping families where an Ivy League school ends up being less expensive than Cal State LA, right? Because Cal State LA as a state school is under budget and deficit cuts. They don't have an endowment of a bunch of free money that they can give to people for their GPA. There just aren't monies like that, right? Whereas an Ivy League school has an endowment. They can give money for your GPA. They can give money because you were in leadership. They can give money because you played a musical instrument. There's just more ways for a student to bring down the cost than, say, at a state school, right? So a lot of times, as students are building their college list, we look at the price tag and go, $65,000, no way. Right? But if I could go to that $65,000 school for under 20, there might be way more value there than going to a school that is only 35,000 and I get no assistance. Right? That's why I bring up a case study like this. We can get more into the intricacies at another time if people have questions, but that's the general idea of why we need to look at these affordability numbers. Okay? So once we've looked at affordability, now we have to start thinking about where is this money going to come from? How are we going to fund paying the bill? So most families initially start looking at, okay, what do we have saved, right? So parents start looking in checking, savings, money markets, CDs, any places where they've stashed money. Maybe it's in the backyard. I don't know. Right? But where have we saved for our students' education? Sometimes that's in the form of a 529 plan. 529 plan is a college savings plan that oftentimes parents will utilize to save specifically for college because it has certain advantages. As a student is growing up, parents can stash away money into it. It can be invested and that money can grow. The government allows it to grow tax-free or tax-deferred, I should say. And then when you use the funds for college, it can be used tax-free. So the money is growing because it's earning. It's not going to go gangbusters and make, amazing profit. They're meant to be conservative investments because it's trying to protect the money that you're saving because it's for college, right? So it's not risky. It's not speculative, right? We're not investing in hot stocks, right? Because we're trying to save long-term for our kids' education. But if we use that for qualified tuition, fees, expenses, we can use it tax-free. It's very flexible. You can roll it to a sibling if one of your students doesn't use it all. Maybe you have a student who you save for in a 529 plan and they decide, Mom, Dad, I'm not going to college. I'm just going to start a business. You could roll it to your next child. You can use a 529 plan even for graduate school if you want. Basically, the funds are available to you into your 30s. Only if you use the funds for something other than college are you penalized. So let's say your oldest or your only doesn't go to college. You can get the money out, that's fine. But the IRS is going to say, because you didn't use it for college, it was meant for that, we're going to tax you at ordinary income tax. And because you didn't use it for college, there's a 10% IRS penalty, right? Other than that, it is sort of an amazing long-term beneficial type of fund to be using. So if you have younger children, it
Can I ask a
pays.
question real quick though, Brian?
Yeah, yeah.
But colleges use that. Is there any kind of, are you being penalized if you're using that because they take that into consideration for your financial aid?
Great question. Yeah.
Okay.
So as we talked about last time, when we were looking at what is assessed on the FAFSA, because a 529 plan is parent owned and the student is the beneficiary, it's counted on the FAFSA as a parental asset, right? But only 5.6% of it goes into the calculation. So it's better than having just saved in a savings account in your student's name, because that would be assessed at 20%. So they do give us a break for saving for college in a 529 plan. It's only calculated at 5.6% or assessed at 5.6%. So that is helpful, right? Now, as we mentioned last time as well, sometimes other family members can open a 529 plan for a student. If that's the case, then it's not reported anywhere on the parent's FAFSA. This is not a parent asset. It's not parent owned. What you have to be careful of though, is let's say grandma and grandpa opened a 529 plan and student is the beneficiary. And then great, student goes to college and college sees money's coming in from grandma and grandpa's 529 plan. Wow. They may start asking and poking around about that. Okay. So sometimes colleges will see if you have outside resources coming in, well, then you certainly don't need some of our financial aid, and they will reduce dollar for dollar what they might have offered you through their own financial aid package. Right. So let's say they initially saw, oh, wow, yeah, they need help. We're going to give them a university grant. Right. But then all of a sudden, grandpa and grandma's $529 start trickling in. They may say, you know what? You don't need our grant. You never told us about grandpa and grandma's money. And so, yeah, I've seen situations where colleges will reduce financial aid packages dollar for dollar because checks started coming in from other sources. Just be careful. So yeah, normally we dip into savings. Normally we dip into 529 plans. Some parents will, and I don't recommend this, and this is why I'm talking about this last, but some parents will say, well, we could tap into the equity in our home. If we're homeowners, we'll pay for college by taking money out of the house, right? You got to be careful about this, because if you get a home loan, right, not a line of credit, but a home equity loan. A home equity loan is when you take out, say, $100,000 out of your home and you put it right into your savings account. What is FAFSA going to ask you about? How much do you have in your checking and savings? You're obligated to report that figure. So you took from one thing to pay for stuff, but now it's decreasing your financial aid because you dumped it in your savings account, right? So something that parents will do with home ownership is they'll say, yeah, we may take out some money from the home, but we'll do it in the form of a line of credit. A line of credit, you only use the money as you need it. So you're not dumping it into your savings account. I don't advocate for taking money out of your home to pay for college. It is sort of one of those last resorts, right? The reason being is that most homeowners are using their home as an asset to fund long-term retirement, right? And so when you start depleting equity, yes, maybe that equity will come back in real estate, right? But as you're depleting that equity, you're also jeopardizing retirement as well. So I just want to bring that up so that we're mindful of what we're having to juggle here when we do that. We're trying to pay for college, but yet we may be sacrificing retirement and vice versa, right? We can certainly get loans. And like we talked about last time, many of us want to be debt adverse. But if there is such a thing as good debt, it's for education, because education is going to give students the tools and empower them to move forward in their careers, right? So in that way, it's good debt, right? So we know that we have access to student loans. We talked last time about parents having access to parent loans. One thing that we didn't talk about last time that I'll bring up here is there are private educational loans, right? So if you've been a longtime customer of Wells Fargo, B of A, Chase, any of the major banks, even your local credit union, there are educational loans. So what that is a private loan that's through that institution. That institution sets its own interest rate and its own rules and policies about repayment, right? So you can't consolidate these private loans or mix them with federal student loans, right? If you get a student loan through Discover Card, Discover does educational loans, right? You can't get a better interest rate on it by consolidating it and mixing it with a subsidized Stafford loan. So that private loan, it's going to be its own separate, just private thing. Now you can mix private loans and consolidate those together, right? But what you have to look out for with the private loans is the fine print. Are there prepayment penalties? What if you want to just pay it off and get it over with and get it done? Maybe there's rules in the fine print that say we don't allow for prepayment. Why? Because they want that loan to last as long as possible. Why? So that they can collect more interest from you, right? So that's my warning to you. If you have to resort to a private loan, you need to read the fine print. Another type of loan that you can also look for is in the nonprofit space. There are many nonprofit organizations that offer community members interest-free loans, where they will have different loan amounts, say up to $10,000. You have to maybe start repayment now, but repayment is like $75 a month. And they've raised these funds, right? Not to make money off of them, but to help the community, right? And so they do not charge interest on them. If you need to find these, contact Christina, contact myself, and we'll get you some that you can look for within LA County. Some of us are gonna just try to fund things out of pocket from our income and try to incorporate that with monthly expenses. That may be difficult. If you're adding another $1,000 a month, $500 a month, I don't know, maybe even another $200 a month would prove difficult, right? So one thing that colleges offer, if for your portion that's out of pocket, is to use a payment plan, right? Or pay in installments. Because parents always ask me, like, when is the bill coming due? Am I gonna have to pay $25,000? Like, how does this work? Remember, we talked about last time that basically once your student goes to college and they become 18, all of the financial information, academic information is all protected under student rights and privacy. And now parents don't even have access to the student bill unless they've been given authorization, right? So a lot of times I say that because parents are sort of like, my kid's going to college and I haven't even gotten a bill yet. Like, how does this even work? Well, the student is getting the bill. And they need to give authorization for you to even pay it. But when you do get the bill, you can set up payment plans. Some colleges have that by quarter, some of them have it by semester, or they have monthly installments. So that can help sort of ease and manage the out-of-pocket cost, right? Because then you're not on the hook for these large lump sums, okay? Then the other place that we can look for funding too is in outside scholarships. So once your student has applied, the work is not done. They should also be applying for outside scholarships. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. Here's some real simple, easy go-to scholarship resources that students can go to and find scholarships. Some of these are very simple online applications that they can do. Some of them require an essay. Some of them may require a student to also provide an unofficial copy of their transcript. But all of these sites are basically search engines where a student can search for free and basically filter scholarship opportunities based on their student profile, what their grade point average is, what they're looking to study in college, what they want to major in, and even very, very specific sort of student profile criteria based on gender, based on first generation to go to college, some based on height. Yeah, it gets the criteria and eligibility can get very, very specific. So that's why these sites are very helpful, because a student just has to enter and answer these questions, enter in some basic student profile information, and then it will begin sorting and tracking scholarships that they would be most eligible for. That saves a student a lot of time and energy in having to apply to all these different kinds of scholarships when maybe they're not really eligible for it. They're sort of wasting their time doing that. So obviously, sort of the name of the game with outside scholarships is quantity over quality, right? So a lot of times you'll have students applying to the biggest scholarships. I want to get the Coca-Cola $50,000 scholarship. Well, obviously with those, the competition is much greater because there's more students looking for that big payoff, right? Rather than looking to the big ones, I always advise students and parents to start hunting and gathering locally, right? Just like Emily just mentioned, local organizations, local nonprofits, local service organizations, okay? Like BHC offering a $500 to a $1,500 local community scholarship. Hunt and gather those up, that will add up over time, and you're more likely to get those scholarships than that big Coca-Cola scholarship. A prime example of how difficult that is there's an insurance company that gives a $50,000 scholarship, but they only give out 50 of them a year. And to make matters more competitive, they only give out one per state, right? So here are all these students, tens of thousands of students in California, let's say, fighting for that one scholarship, right? I would rather have a student be out gathering up the $1,500, going to Kiwanis, applying to a Kiwanis, a Chamber of Commerce, a Rotary. Yeah, exactly. And gathering these monies up, you're going to be more likely to be successful.
PTA actually is another one that has a lot that people had no idea, even for parent members as well as students.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, PTAs, something that students don't do, only because high school counseling offices just don't have the time to do that. High school counseling offices get advertisements and marketing materials for tons and tons of scholarships. And they've really got like one bulletin board somewhere. So if a student is not looking out for this, what a student can do, go to your counselor and say, look, what are some local scholarships that you've seen come through that I can apply to? But students just aren't asking.
Actually, Burroughs does a pretty good job, if I must say, Mrs. Campos in their Career and College Center, of getting that information out.
Yeah, Yeah, some schools definitely, especially with like platforms like Schoology, they can communicate, with parents and students on an ongoing basis. So counselors are just posting, right? So yeah, it does take some energy and effort to apply to these. It takes some energy and effort to be on the lookout for them. But generally, scholarships are running basically throughout the year, but a majority of them have application deadlines by the new year. So when this year ends for next year, and then sort of into the spring, just like BHCs for that matter. There are some that you can find, there's less of them, but there are some that you can find that have deadlines even into the summertime. So students should always sort of be looking year round. And while I'm talking about that, I should also mention for students who are either in college right now or are applying to be incoming freshmen next year, there are also going to be other departmental scholarships at schools that they're just not offering to freshmen right now. Why? Because they don't want to give money to somebody who's going to change their major. Right? So once you get in and you get settled into a major and you're going to be a biology major, let's say, ask your bio department about departmental scholarships that are available at the school. So by the time you're in second year, third year, of course they want to give money to you because they know you've pretty much settled and decided on that major. So they're much more willing to give those funds. One last thing I want to say here is raise.me or RaiseMe is this interesting app that students can put on their phone while they're sort of in the application process. So if they're curious, what would a school give me in free money? They can use the RaiseMe app to say, put in Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana. And Tulane will give them an indication of, okay, based on your GPA, based on the clubs that you're involved in, your leadership activities, your athletics, while you put in these things, you are raising money, right? In terms of seeing what kind of free money a school like Tulane would give you, even before you apply. So this is not money that they're going to give in addition or extra, but it's giving you an initial indication of what you could potentially get at Tulane. Interesting concept.
That is good.
Yeah. Okay. Your student got in, they got accepted. You got the acceptance notice in the student portal, you got the email. Some schools still send that traditional thick envelope, right? Now you got to figure out how helpful is this school going to be. You're going to get the financial aid award. Most of the time, that's going to be in the student's portal. Okay. So when the student logs into their applicant portal, there's going to be a financial aid tab. And once financial aid office has put together the numbers from the FAFSA, from the CSS profile, they're going to come up with a financial aid package for your student. This is an example of traditionally what you might see. The school will try to, there at the top, give you the estimated cost of attendance for that year and what the breakdown is in terms of costs. So we talked about that last time. Direct costs, indirect costs. Direct costs meaning tuition, fees, room and board. We know what it's going to be. It is what it is. The school knows this to the dollar. The indirect costs, the ones that are sort of estimated are, well, we don't know exactly how much a student is going to spend on books and materials and supplies, but in this case, it's around $1,000. You might want a budget for travel, for miscellaneous, for personal expenses, $2,000. And all of our students use technology. They're probably going to need a computer, $1,500. Right? Nice even numbers here. Where do they get these numbers from? Again, these are just estimates, right? So your student may not need a new laptop because they got one last year. So that's $1,500 less. Your student might not need to spend $2,000 to travel to college and back, right? So what the school tries to do in the award package is give you the total cost of attendance. And then they give you a breakdown. Some schools are better at it than others. For some, it's like deciphering like hieroglyphics. Okay. This school, I give as an example because they broke it out by semester. So you have your fall semester and your spring semester. What they didn't do so well is they just had a big old list of stuff, right? So this student got a Perkins loan, 1,000 in the fall, 1,000 in the spring, right? So loan, that's borrowed money. That's not free. A Stafford loan. Oh, look at that. The total, 3,500, must be a freshman, right? Broken into semesters. They also got the unsubsidized portion, 2,000, right? So remember, interest is not accruing on the subsidized, but on the unsubsidized 2,000 portion, interest is building while the student is in school. So this college is offering the student these loans. So before the student starts, they can make a decision as to whether they want to take those loans or not. Just because it's listed doesn't mean you have to take those loans. So there will be a feature where you can accept or decline. Maybe you don't want to borrow that much. You can actually say, I don't want to take 3,500 in a subsidized. I'm going to take 2,000. Okay. Then below that, we have the school scholarship. I don't even know what that is, but apparently they're giving the student $15,000. Probably based on GPA, academic performance, something. They're getting a federal Pell Grant, right? Remember we said Pell Grant is for lower income families. So that's 1,000. That's a grant. That's free money. That's money we don't have to pay back. So that's looking good.
Can I ask you a quick question about that? I'm sorry.
Sure.
So what if you drop, say you're given a Pell Grant and you drop your classes or you fail the course? There's no repercussion for that. Like you wouldn't be expected to pay that back, or it doesn't catch up with you, I guess is the question.
No, not in that situation, but there are some grants and scholarships that have certain requirements, certain policies about you have to be, say, a full-time student. And for them, what does a full-time student mean? Does that mean 12 units? If you fall below 12 units, do you jeopardize receiving those monies in the future? That's a possibility, right? So yeah, a lot of times students will go, oh man, you know what, this semester is too difficult. I'm going to drop a bunch of classes. And then they realize by doing that, by taking less units, they're missing some of their financial aid because it was taken away. Because the premise is, well, I guess you don't need it anymore.
Right, exactly.
You're not taking the classes. So before students go dropping stuff, you need to make sure that you're not dipping below the number of units for that particular grant. We're getting a supplemental opportunity grant, educational opportunity grant. That's free money. Oh, we got a state grant. Last time we talked about the Cal grant. We talked about the middle class scholarship, right? And we're getting some work study. So I'm going to have a job on campus and I'm going to earn my $3,000 and it's going to go towards my tuition, right? So there's the total aid package, $28,400. Based on the estimated cost of attendance of $38,400, this package is assuming I'm going to pay $10,000 out of pocket, right? But then I'm also borrowing, let's just add that up, $7,500. So technically I'm paying 10 out of pocket and I'm borrowing $7,500. So I'm on the hook for $17,500, which is almost half. So I got all these scholarships and I'm grateful for that, right? But I'm still on the hook for quite a bit. Let's look at another version. Sometimes I've seen them as bad as this, where they just say, here's the cost, tuition, fees, boom, here's the total. 34,500. They don't even break it down, right? And then they just list everything. And I've got to figure out what is free money, what is borrowed money, and what is worked for, right? But if I go down to the bottom and I go, wow, expected net cost, I'm only going to pay $5,800 to go to this college. Is that true? My total financial aid is $28,700. My expected net cost, my net out of pocket, $5,800. What a deal for a $34,000 school. I'm paying $5,800. That would be amazing, but it's not true. Look at the Parent Plus loan. That's not helpful because I got to borrow, they're saying, according to their math, it'd be helpful if I borrowed $12,200. So $12,200 of that financial aid package is in borrowed parent loan money. So that's not the school helping me. That's the school saying you could borrow it and come up with it yourself, parent, right? So if I don't, where's the $12,200 going to come from? My pocket, right? And look what else is in there. We also have unsubsidized student loans, subsidized Stafford loan. So we're borrowing there. We're borrowing a Perkins loan. There's a lot of borrowing going on in this list. But if I just looked at bottom line, 5,800, wow, super cheap. No, right? That's why we have to evaluate and look closely at what the school is actually offering us in each of these financial aid packages once our student is accepted. So if I have that package in hand, how can I actually go back to the school and say, wait a second, I can't borrow 12,200. I mean, I could, but is there any way we can find a different way to do this? Or you're expecting me to pay 10,000 out of pocket, and while the FAFSA says we can afford that, we actually can't. So the FAFSA only sort of scratches the surface on a household's financial situation. Maybe there's things that you need to explain and communicate to the financial aid department that in asking for help, they need to know about.
I just wanted to quickly mention a program or a scholarship that we offer. It's called the Allen Cottriel Scholarship after the first board president of Burbank Housing Corporation. It's been around since 2004. And you know, the scholarships, it's a need-based scholarship. The scholarship awards can range anywhere from $500 to $1,500 per year per student. In the 4 years that I've been there, I don't think we've ever rejected an application. So it's pretty much a scholarship to anyone who applies that is obviously eligible for this particular scholarship. So you would have to be a current BHC resident, and we do target the youth in the community. So at least 2 years from graduating high school for first-time applicants, and you can apply up to four times. So basically to get the kids through their undergraduate career. And then yeah, it's a pretty simple application process. It goes from basically the beginning of April is when the application process starts, and it goes all the way up until I believe the end of June. So about 2 months to submit the application, and we usually have a scholarship ceremony to award the kids a free dinner, but obviously this year we weren't able to do that. It is a tax-free scholarship, so it's for tuition, books, school supplies. And yeah, I would be the contact person. So my email is elopez@burbankhousingcorp.org. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me. and I would be your best contact person.